Hello and welcome to Mirror Talk. We have moments where we just have to pause. Just pause and take a break and reflect on life. Remember, you are strong, you are enough, you are capable, you are blessed, and you are loved. Your moment of greatness starts now. Karen is a leadership and influence expert, international keynote speaker, and the best-selling author of several books. Her latest book, The Tao of Influence, is a Wall Street Journal bestseller and even now on the top 20 list of book categories everywhere around the world. You can read about her and amazing works on KarenMcGregor.com. How are you doing, Karen?
I'm well. Thank you for having me, Toby.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate this, and I'm looking forward to learning so much from you. Starting off from your book, this The Tao of Influence. This is an amazing book, a very wonderful book, and I want us to go from one pillar to the next pillar to the next pillar till till we get to the end of the journey. Then I'm satisfied, hopefully. So, we'll start off with the introduction. You introduced how the whole journey started from the burial of your father, where you were at home with your mom, and a letter was being delivered by your neighbor. So can you take off from there so I don't narrate your story?
Yes, for sure. Yes. So my father passed away, and I was at my mom's home. And there were many cards coming, many sympathy cards. And but one struck me because it looked like it was a regular sympathy card. I was about to put it on the table, and then I noticed something different about it. And so when I opened it, it actually was a long letter. Not just a card, but inside there was this long letter, and it said that although my neighbor, she was 9 months pregnant, she didn't know my father and mother very well. She just sort of looked out the window and saw my dad. She said that he was such a huge influence on her because she would look out the window, and every day he'd be outside working in the yard, and he was so happy. He just had this radiant smile, and he would work on, different things like a birdhouse or fixing the fence or, making picnic table for someone. And he was always just beaming with this light. And what I realized from that was that, for many, many years, I've been what most people call a traditional influencer, in that I help people to speak on the stage. I help them to present on stage and in webinars. And so for the first time, I was really confronted by what actually is influence. Is it just the words that we say? Is it just, how we present ourselves? And so that took me on a really deep journey to understand the deeper levels of influence. And that's where you mentioned, the 4 pillars and what we can do to really be in that powerful state of being versus just saying, well, if I have these things checked off my list, then I'm going to be influential. And that's certainly not the case for most people.
Yeah, that's very true. And you went through this, use this, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, the Tao Te Ching, I guess.
So it's actually pronounced with a T. Interestingly enough, it's a D pronunciation. So sorry, it's spelled with a T, pronounced with a D. So Tao of Influence, based on the Tao Te Ching, which I know you're probably going to ask me about. So
Yes.
do you mind if I say what it is for people who don't know?
Yes, please.
So the Tao Te Ching is a very tiny book of 81 verses, and it's actually touted as one of the most wise books ever written in history. Scholars say that, some people think it's a religious book, but it's actually a deeply philosophical book about how to live life. And so because it's so short, though, and it was written, 4,000 years ago by Lao Tzu, The translation makes it very heavy, almost like poetry. So you really have to dig deep and settle into it. And so what I did was I thought, well, this is such a profound book, but how can I take the concepts of the Tao and use them within my book, because I had been a huge follower of the Tao for years. And when my father died, everything came together, and I realized, wow, the way that he lived is the way of the Tao. And so that book, the quotes in that book and the concepts in that book become more user friendly, so to speak,
Yes.
through my four pillars and through the stories and so forth in the book.
Yes. And talking about Tao Te Ching, it means living and applying the great way, according to what I read in
Yes.
your book.
Yes,
Yes.
it is. Yes. And people always ask me, so, what is the great way? What does that
Mm.
mean? And so it really like on a deeper spiritual sense, it really is the way that we um, uh, manifest our reality through who we are being, not necessarily what we do. So I always say to people, because a lot of people ask me about purpose as an example, and
Mm.
they say, what is my deeper purpose? And I always say your deeper purpose is to love. It's not a particular, um, you know, um, job. It's not a particular path in your career.
Yes.
You could be peeling potatoes and be a huge influencer,
Mm.
because you understand that the way is really the way of love. Now, that sounds very simplistic, but I get into how we humans make it so darn complicated. And because of that, we can really screw things up, as we've seen politically over the last number of years, and seems to be getting worse, not better. So,
Mm.
the timing of this book has been really important for me as well, to share with people that, the Tao, the way of love, is possible if we look at those four pillars and really start to look within ourselves, rather than look for the answers outside of us.
Yes. And that's what I appreciated about the book. I love about the book, actually. It's centered on love. Everything about it is love, love. God, love, light. As in, it's wonderful. And I would love us to like go through the pillars. But before we go through the pillars, you made mention of this already. It's a very timely book at this moment. It's very important for us to read the book, because it's first, you first stated like the three stages or the three levels of influence. You said first you have this self-centeredness, then later you have the win-win mentality, then later you have the selflessness. And the selflessness is what we are trying to achieve, right?
Yes, and I love that you've brought that up, because really those three phases, I think almost all of us go through.
Mm.
When we're young, we just want to survive and get out there and do the best we can, and we're focused on ourselves. But it's often for a reason, because we're not developmentally there yet to be able to really think deeply about other people, or maybe about the world and how our actions impact the world. So we do this really out of survival, out of fear. Just keep going. Now there are many young people
Mm.
that I've noticed that are well advanced in that journey, and so I'm not saying that all young people are like that, but many people are, and it's okay. It's a part that most of us have to experience. Then the second of those, what you said around the win-win, is that you start to look at life as a transaction.
Mm.
And so this is where, in my marriage, I've only been married once, but divorced now. But when I look back on my marriage, I was 24 when I met my husband, 27 when we got married. And I just realized, that I wasn't really in the, how can I say, in the mode of, um, of giving, of love. It was more like, well, you're going to do this for me, and I'm going to do this for you. And if we both do things for each other, then we're going to have a happy marriage.
Yeah.
And even though it wasn't stated, it was a subconscious agreement on both of our sides.
Mm.
And so that's how we played things out. Well, I'll, take care of the kids and you go out and work, or I'll buy this thing for you. And, if you can go out and do this other chore for me, that would be really great.
Mm.
And I didn't realize that was happening. Again, back in the day for me as a younger person, I wasn't self-aware. So a lot of us, even in our work as well as marriage and partnership, we look at life through transaction. And that's something that I really break down in the Tao of Influence is, how can we get to the third level where there is no longer a transaction? There is no longer thinking, well, I did this for you, so you better do this for
It's for
me.
me. Yeah.
And that's really where true peace comes from, doesn't it, Toby? Like, I feel like,
Yes.
if we want peace, we can no longer live in that transactional world.
Mm. You do something without expecting something back for a pay or as a reply or something. You just do it because you do it out of love, actually. You do it out of free will, actually, without expecting something back for your actions.
Exactly. Yes. And that's really difficult for a lot of people to do. It's easy to say, it's more difficult to do, but I suggest anyone who's listening to really look at your words, your thoughts, your behaviors, and ask yourself, is this transactional, or is it coming from a deeper place of love for people, love for the planet? And that self-awareness, again, really the examination is so vital.
Sorry for digressing. That's one very interesting thing I found about the book. At the end of every chapter, or most of chapters, we have this reflection center. Reflection sections, actually, where you tell the readers, or tell someone like me to, go through this part. For example, let me jump into the first pillar. When I read about power, you said, oh, these patterns. If you notice this pattern in your life, then you can do this. Then you can do this. I mean, I found that very amazing. So I'm encouraging everyone who is listening to pick up the book and go through the reflections, go through every pillar. But we'll get to that very soon. We'll get to that later in the discussion.
Yes, and most of the people who've taken the time to email me back and talk about the book, that section is really powerful for them because, as you said, they start to really see the power patterns in both their everyday life, but also in relationship with people that they meet or in business. And it really transforms the way that they look at their life and they look at their relationships.
Yes. And now that we've dived into it already, let us just go into the pillars, right? I
Sure,
mean,
absolutely.
it's really beautiful how you set everything out. Like you went from power to presence to purpose, then to potential. And
Yes.
that's amazing. That's beautiful. Because from power, you have to get rid of some things. And then you go to purpose, then you have to find some things. Then you go to your you go to presence, then you have to be in the moment, be present. Then you go to purpose, then you have to find some things, and potential, you have to just be open to potentials. But
Yes.
I want you to first go through the first pillar, which is power. And let us talk about first of all, let's talk about the patterns that we have to get off and we have to get rid of or avoid.
Absolutely. And just as a note before we jump into that, I love that you mentioned about presence, because a lot of people say, well, just try to be present, or they teach people to be present through meditation and yoga and whatnot. But the reason why it often doesn't work is because we haven't dealt with our patterns of power. So let me go into that and explain that, because it's such an important piece. In order to be fully present and peaceful and happy, we've got to deal with that first. And so that's why that's the first pillar.
Yeah.
So So Toby and everyone listening, how we arrive at power patterns is in fact, everybody does. So there's no one that really can escape it, unless you're the Dalai Lama, perhaps. But even he, I'm sure, would say these things have happened. So how we develop these patterns of what I call distorted power, because my premise is that love is our only true power. It's our pure power. It represents power in its potential for good on the earth. And so we're all born with that. We're all born with this beautiful love power, right?
Yes.
But what happens is that through our very early years, we try to get our needs met. And at first, the needs are very simple, like I'm hungry or I'm tired. And if we're lucky, those needs are met and we're happy. We become happy again. However, as we go to 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, our needs become more complicated. And we realize at some point that someone, or maybe more than one person, doesn't meet our needs. And we make that mean that there's something wrong with us. So whatever that is for all of us, it can be highly traumatic, it can be very subtle. But the minute that a child realizes, oh my goodness, this person's not meeting my needs, their brain often goes to that, oh, okay, that means there's something wrong with me.
Mm.
And so each of us, when we think that, we develop a particular way of getting our needs met. So that way of getting our needs met could be, for some people, whatever works for them, whatever they find works. It could be getting louder, as a little kid, screaming.
Yes.
And, oh, mommy comes and says, oh, it's okay. Or daddy says, okay, I don't want you to scream in the grocery store. You can have that candy,
Yeah.
Or, the opposite, which is some people, some kids, when they realize, okay, my needs are not being met, they withdraw. And literally these patterns you can see as kids grow older, will develop into a pattern versus just occasional behavior. So as an example, I call this the boar, the wild pig.
Yeah.
Is where we want to be controlling and almost aggressive. Now, the reason that we end up being a controller and having that power pattern is because we thought, well, my needs are not being met. I have to control everything and everyone around me in order to feel safe.
Mm.
And so I know that was, for me, that was very much my power pattern. If I just did everything myself, and especially going into adulthood, if I can't trust anyone else to do a good job, so I'm going to do it all. And then, of course, you get exhausted, resentful, bitter, a little bit irritable, bossy, controlling, need to be right. All of that starts to develop from those initial stages of not feeling safe, so taking control and making your life the reality that it is.
Yeah.
Now, there are some good things about a controller, and that is that they typically become very successful. But what is success? That's what we have to ask ourselves. If success is just meeting the goal, that's a very limited definition of success.
Mm.
And so for me, if someone is peaceful, happy, gives from their heart, isn't controlling out of fear, but rather realizes, I better step back here and look at what's really going on.
Mm.
Then I think we all have a chance, at peace and love and actually a happy life. So that's one, is controller is very common. Another one is people who withdraw from life. So they'll watch what's happening. For instance, with COVID right now, there might be people just watching and observing what's happening, not taking part in any conversations, not really wanting to listen to either side of what people postulate is happening, or many sides rather. There's more than two sides.
Yeah.
And that can be good in the fact that it gives them time to think and reflect. And they're often very bright people, who withdraw. But again, if we never fully step into what we fully believe in, what we want out of life, what we really feel is important in life, to step into that, then again, we're often finding in our older years that we are apathetic. We don't enjoy our job anymore, but we still do it. We just don't enjoy it. So there's a lot of ripple effects that happen later in life. You become despondent, just not a vibrant person anymore.
Yeah.
And those are just two, but there's many. There's blame and the judger, the judger in all of us. Oh my goodness, we all have that.
There's a victim also.
The victim. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you for that. Yes, the victim. Oh my goodness. And the martyr.
Yeah.
So, we have all of these patterns that we play out and the stories that we tell ourselves about different people and different events. And if you actually, be pre-lockdown, if you want to know the extent to which we all have these patterns, all you have to do is sit in a coffee shop or a small cafe and just listen to the conversations. And I guarantee you that almost without exception, you will hear the different power patterns. So it might be victim, it might be the judge, it might be the martyr, it might be someone who's controlling the conversation, whatever it is. And then of course there's the person who believes that they're immune to everything and everyone, like the special person.
Yeah, the chosen one. Yeah.
The special person who's not going to do what everyone else is doing because they are different and special, and they have to be, doing their own thing. And so sometimes that's important because it's part of their values or beliefs, but oftentimes it comes from a deeper wound of not being seen. And see, when we're not seen, then we have to make ourselves seen, and we convince ourselves that we're seen through these actions. So it's very interesting. So in the book, I unravel a lot of this to share with people not only their own patterns, but how their patterns get triggered by other people.
Yes.
Right? So as an example, the savior, someone who wants to save the day and wants to get in there and just solve everything. Often that person marries a victim, or their partner in love is a victim. And so when those two get together, they make a perfect breeding ground for each other's wounds, because one person, is really like, oh, thank you so much for saving me. I mean, not in those words, but really that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And the savior gets a little endorphin hit from saving the victim.
Yeah.
Yes. And so they're both getting something out of it, but their stories continue. And so that's where we have to look at, are we really helping someone, or are we doing it out of fear that we're not enough? So that's the really fine line, because some people say, but Karen, saviors help people. They're really, they're good people. And of course they're good people. But if they're doing it out of a reason other than pure love, and that's where we have to get into self-awareness, then it becomes a bit of a transaction. So they're waiting for the next time they can save, or they're waiting for a thank you. Oh, thank
Mm,
you. You're so great. You're such a savior.
mm.
So it becomes a bit transactional in that way.
In that same pillar of power, you have the ego, and you also have a list of needs that you listed. And one that stood out to me was because you made mention of your own personal story, and that's the need for protection against criticism. And you made mention of the story because you're a German Catholic, and yeah, can you tell me the story a little bit and talk about this ego and needs?
Yes. So, ego. So, in the book, I talk about our 10 most common ego needs. And one of them, as you mentioned, is protection from criticism.
Mm,
And so, when I talk about ego, it really is that part of our mind that wants to convince us that we're not enough, or that we're not safe, that we're not worthy. So, it always wants to come back to the wound, and yet at the same time it doesn't want to deal with the wound. It doesn't
mm,
want us to deal with the wound because it's too scary to deal with the
you-
original wound.
mm,
So protection against criticism is really, whenever someone says something, that could be very beneficial for us. I remember, as an example, I think I put this in the book. As an example, I would have, 100 evaluations of a talk that I did. Um, and
yeah,
one person would rip my talk apart, and I would be devastated, even though the 99 other people had
yeah,
wonderful things to say.
true.
and and so, I really had to look at that part of myself in terms of what is that protective mechanism that I hold so tight to me. And when I really went back in time, I realized, wow, as a young girl, the very, first times that I realized, or I thought that I
Mm,
wasn't enough, and I had to try harder, I had to control things,
yeah,
that wound was never addressed. So
mm,
it's always there. It's always fresh,
mm,
right?
yes.
So, and the only way we can really release that is through what I call, and the Buddhists do this too. This is a common Buddhist practice, is to see your thoughts as not part of you. So whenever I would have the thought of, oh, I can't believe that person said that, you know, what kind of a person would do that or
Mm,
say that to me?
mm,
Then I would just watch the story in my head and recognize the thoughts in my head were all stemming from that original wound. And did the thoughts stop? No, they're not going to stop. But you can minimize them by allowing them to be distanced from you. So, in other words, you see them going down the river of thought,
mm,
visually in your mind, you see them going down the river of thought, and you recognize that that is not you. It is
mm.
simply a thought that was based in the past and doesn't define who you are.
And yeah, that's very valid. That's very important. Like you separate yourself or you distance yourself from your thoughts, then you yeah say that's not who I am. My thoughts is not who I am, and that's where you could get rid of the bad thoughts.
Yes.
That's awesome. And also, you listed some other ego needs, like the need to be right, for example, or the need for approval. Those are very relatable needs. You always want to be right. You always want that approval. Like, yes, validates me. Yeah, approve me. Or the need to stay safe, especially in this time of COVID. You want to stay safe. You have that ego to just keep everything together to stay safe. Take control of your situation, and yeah, those are very yeah. I advise everyone to go through those books and to go through the needs and read what you can do to get rid of these egos.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning those other three, because again, uh, they're so rampant, so integrated into most of our daily lives.
mm,
Like you said, the need to be right. How many of us in a meeting have, tried to get the last word, or tried, or maybe we didn't, but we left the meeting saying, "Ah, that person doesn't know anything. I know, but they don't."
mm.
And so we see this in the time of COVID more than ever before, especially on
Mm,
social media,
mm,
that people. Let's take the topic of vaccinations. Some people want them, other people don't,
mm,
and it appears, at least on social media, that people's need to be right about the vaccinations is stronger than their need for community, for love, for peace, for joy, and so there's a huge you know uh, diversity there, where I can see that people's need to be right is more important than anything else, and that's where I think it gets kind of dangerous, to be honest with you. I
mm,
I, I see a lot of darkness in that kind of behavior,
mm.
and it just starts with our need to be right, and then the next thing you know, people are getting death threats, and I
Yeah.
mean, it's really a crazy world we live in right now. But the reason that I wrote the book, I believe, is partly because these small things
Mm.
in our daily life can actually become very, very big things.
Yes, yes, that's very true. And before they become very big things, we have to, change our language, for example. And this leads me to the 7 ways to illuminate your power. So yeah, we have you have to change your language. You have to choose silence. Sometimes, like when there's an argument, you just choose to be quiet, or choose, to be in a quiet environment, or practice gratitude, or you also have practicing acceptance also is also included. Practicing acceptance, then choose forgiveness also is there. Then you have choose humility. One that stood out to me is the last one, and that's experience the power of prayer.
Mm,
So
yeah.
yeah, you're my teacher this evening. So I just made mention of the point. Can you walk me through the 7 ways to illuminate my power?
For sure. So, with the time we have, I think what I'll do is I'll focus on a couple. The power of prayer. A lot of people say, "Well, I'm not religious. I'm not praying," and prayer actually doesn't have to do with religion. So I just want to make that clear, that
Mm,
it can be a religious act, but it doesn't have to be. It's your connection to God, to universe, whatever you want to call our beautiful, divine energy.
yeah.
It is your communication
Mm,
with that beautiful love energy, which many people call God. Um, so, what I write about is that there are people in the world that are teaching me about different types of prayer, because when I grew up, it was like, okay, we're going to recite this prayer before dinner.
mm. Yeah, the Catholic way, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go to bed and we're going to recite, two or three more, and we're going to do the same ones every day. And I thought that was the way everybody did it, because I
Yes.
was young and I didn't know any
Mm,
different.
mm,
And so one day I went to a monastery, and it was actually women, the sisters, and they were devoting their entire life. That's all they did was pray. So I thought, well, who better to ask about prayer than someone who does it 24 hours a day?
yeah.
And so they were actually so lovely. They really opened up their minds and hearts to me, and they talked about how prayer could be just picking up a beautiful wisdom text, and
Mm,
choosing, just choosing a, well, here we have from the Tao Te Ching, one who seeks his treasure from the outer world is cut off from his own roots.
Mm,
Without roots, he becomes restless. His mind becomes weak. So, as an example, something like that, you would just meditate on it.
mm,
And you just, walk, meditate. Maybe there's a single word that you meditate on. But whatever it is, you're feeling into it, you're breathing it, you're experiencing it
mm,
fully.
mm,
So that's one way. Another way is to have questions that you ask, uh, a conversation. I know
mm,
for me, I hear divine guidance, so I can hear whatever I say. I can hear back what that answer is or what that communication is, and sometimes I just listen. I don't talk at all,
mm.
and so there's that's just a small example of what we can experience in prayer.
Yes.
But I believe that the most important thing, Toby, when we go to pray, is that we don't do it as a transaction, because we're so used to living in a transactional world that we don't want to have like a Santa Claus prayer.
Mm.
Like, please get me this new Mercedes Benz, or, please make my boss stop acting like an idiot,
Yeah.
And so I know Carolyn Mace, she's one of my dearest mentors. She always says that sometimes prayers are answered in ways that are the complete opposite of what you want,
Mm,
but what your ego wants is not necessarily the best thing for your growth.
mm,
And so I thought that was so profound,
mm,
because really, it's true. When we pray, we don't pray from our ego. We don't pray from that place of um, I'm fearful, therefore I better get what I want in order to
mm,
feel better about this situation and about myself.
mm.
So when we come from that place, it can be very transactional, almost like demanding.
Yeah.
And so it's hard when we're scared, and for instance, with the pandemic, not knowing how much longer it's going to last.
Mm,
But coming from a place of love versus fear is really what we ideally would, you know, um, find uh, to be the most useful in terms of when we get into prayer.
prayer. Yes. And you said it all already perfectly well. I mean, it's very important to make it a very non-transactional experience with God or with the divine being that you are speaking with. And you made mention of asking question and you receive the answer like directly. And I think that's one thing that helps with that is what you talked about in the second pillar with presence. You have this you have this oneness, or you have this unity consciousness, and I think that's what helps with divine connection, I guess.
Yeah, it really is, because presence can be, a lot of people think presence is just learning to be here in the now, but it's also learning to be a spiritual and an earth being. So we have both parts of us. And if we are here now in the present on earth, where
Mm,
we're connecting with people, we're in our daily jobs or whatever it is that we're doing, um, that we're able to not only be here now, but because we're here now, we also hear divine guidance. We can be connected to divine guidance at all times.
yeah.
So there's never a time that we're not that we are alone.
Mm,
So there's no such thing as being alone. We're always supported by our guidance, and whatever beliefs you have about that, it's great. All I'm saying is that when we're not present, we lose that connection to the divine,
mm,
because what happens is ego and fear and the drive for some kind of goal
yeah.
overtakes the connection that we have.
Connection. Mhm. That's very true. That's very true. And just because of the limited time we have, I won't go deep into presence anymore. You've made mention of enough already. Anyone wants to know more about this should pick up the book and and read up the whole chapter about presence and be blessed by it, as I was blessed. So I'll just move on to the next pillar, and that is purpose, which is very important. So, first question is, how can I understand my purpose?
Well, first of all, there's really two critical parts to purpose. One is what I call our soul calling, and that's our second level purpose. First level purpose is just to survive. It's just really we're on a survival level.
Mm.
But once we go beyond survival level and having our basic needs met, there is what I call the soul's calling. And quite often people confuse it to be career based or to be a particular job. It can be part of your calling, but often your calling is much greater than a single job or a single project or that kind of thing. So for me, my for many years I've known that I have a call to write and I have a call to speak. So that communication aspect of speaking and writing, and also teaching what I know. So I'm an archetypal teacher. So whatever I really understand well, there's a soul calling in me to share that with other people.
Mm.
And that comes from a deep place of love, not from fear. So it's that's how you know it's your calling. It's
Yes.
not a have to, it's
Mm.
a I must, because it's such a deep part of me that it wants to spill out of me. It
Yes.
oozes out of us.
Exactly. With the tendency of, or with the intention to help other people, to bless other people's life.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And really a lot of people say, "Oh, but I'm stuck, I don't know what my purpose is." And when you read the book, you'll understand more about it and have a process in which to gain much more clarity.
Mm.
But the first thing is, when you work on the power and you work on your presence, you become more and more aware. That's why the first two pillars are in that order, but you
Mm.
become more and more aware of your divine calling, the connection that you have
Mm.
with the divine. And when that happens, you just pick up the clues. Like it's almost like, I'm dating myself here, but ET come home, and they have those little M&Ms on the path, and the
Yeah.
little girl's trying to find her way
Yeah.
with the little M&Ms.
Yeah.
And so I always say we are on a journey home, and home meaning, of course, our calling, our deeper soul's calling.
Mm.
And so what I believe is that we are given these little M&Ms, these little droplets, which lead us back to who we really are. But most of us are so busy in our fear and wanting and desiring, to have something, that we don't actually see the little droplets that are leading to our purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said it already. We need clarity, and I think you made mention of 5 ways or stages of clarity of getting clarity actually. And I'll leave that to the readers to pick up the book and find out.
Yes, that would be wonderful. I really appreciate anyone who, wants to pick up a copy. If you go to KarenMcGregor.com, you can actually also, when you purchase the book,
Mm.
we will give you some extra gifts there that will help you on your journey.
That's amazing. I got my copy from Amazon.com, but
Yeah, that's okay.
it's
You
better.
can just, anybody who buys it on Amazon, that's great. You just send me in an email that
Yeah.
you've purchased it, and we'll send you, the extra additional training, which will complement the book.
Oh, Okay, yeah. I should send you an email afterwards then.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Toby. Thank you. Yes, and
So,
so the next pillar, the last pillar, is
yes,
around potential. So,
exactly.
what did you think about that pillar, Toby?
For me, potential it's very important. And you made mention of one thing I read, and what I love about it was that you have to be open. You have to have that openness for greatness, for the divine calling that you have upon your life.
Yes.
And one thing that stood out to me there was the first chapter there, that was holy flow. How do I develop my holy flow? How do I develop the holy flow?
Yes. You know, that was my favorite chapter to write. So I'm so glad that you picked up on that and that you asked me that. So, you know, to reach our potential, people in the past have only focused on just write your goals down, you know, and micro steps to achieve your goals, which is all great and that's wonderful. But I'm coming from a different place when I talk about potential and influence. And that is that we always want to become who we really are rather than who our ego wants us to be.
Mm,
So, in the holy flow, when you're in the holy flow, it means that you're becoming more of who you are rather than becoming more of who your dad, your mom, society, you know, whoever, media, for goodness sake, media, you know, they want us to have more, to be
mm,
more, to
mm,
have that story of success that we see that's so common.
mm.
And in fact, you
Yeah.
know, as I get older, Toby, I'm really being led back to really humble roots. Like
Mm,
I'm being guided very much to, you know, go to Italy and just have a little garden and you know
mm,
a very small, modest home, and
yeah.
just live off the land.
Mm,
And I trust that guidance because, you know, uh, again, as the awareness comes to me, I realize that all the layers of identity,
mm,
you know, for instance, being a great speaker. So I've been on stages with thousands of people, Deepak Chopra and Tony Robbins, and all of the layers of you're a great speaker, you're a great writer. So with my Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Tao of Influence, you're a great writer.
mm,
And it's nice to get those, but the ego wants to latch on to those
mm,
and stop us from being in the holy flow. So, as an example, when COVID hit, I like to joke that, you know, I was really my book was in the final stages of printing and production.
mm.
And I thought to myself, I need to go back and read my own book because I've lost my way here.
Mm, yeah.
So you know, it can happen to all of us, but
Mm,
the importance of the holy flow is, can you follow those little seeds of guidance that are actually bringing you back home to who you are versus who you think you are or who other people want you to be?
mm,
And so one of the ways that I talk about in that chapter is
yeah.
to develop and hone your intuition.
Mm,
And David Wolfe, I actually interviewed many wonderful people, Dr. John DeMartini and David Wolfe and Beyonce's father, which was a really cool experience
yeah.
to interview him. But I remember clearly David Wolfe in particular, he said, you know, I followed the holy flow. And he's actually the one that gave me that word because I thought, wow, what a powerful word. He
Mm,
said, I followed the holy flow. And I said, what does that mean to you? And he said, well, it's like if somebody says you should read that book, rather than write off the person, right? He looks for, is there another sign that I should read that book? Right?
mm,
Because he's a really busy guy. He's, you know, he's known all over the world as the superfoods guru.
mm,
And people, you know, he's got 12 million followers on social media. So he's a busy man. But if he sees maybe a second time and a third time, the drops of, oh, there it is again, or there's something related to that book that I just saw, so I better read that book. Does that make sense?
Yes,
You're,
yes.
you're looking at, we only have so much time, so we can't read every book. But if there's certain clues, then you tune in and you say, yes, I'm going to go and pick up that book.
Yes.
So that's one way in which, the holy flow can come to us. Another way is to just sit silent and allow the guidance to come to us. Sometimes it's through visions. Some people hear nothing. My partner, as an example, he hears nothing at all when there's the guidance comes, but because he's a painter, he sees lots of things come. And so some people get guidance through visual images, through dreams, through synchronicities. They may not get it through voice.
Voice, yeah. And that's a very important point. On one thing I also learned from the book, that's silence part. It's as in this modern age, it's very difficult to be silent, to keep quiet, to put the phones away, to put the TV off, to just stay quietly and connect to the divine being, to connect to God, and just get inspiration, or get, at least pay attention to the signs that the universe is giving to you, or God is giving to you.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So you made mention of calibrating your expectations, and you talked about now wanting to move to Italy, get a small garden, a small home, and maybe earlier you wanted to get a big mansion and city, or big apartment and a skyscraper, and or the penthouse, and get a Bentley or a Maserati. So calibrating your expectation is also very important when attain your potentials in life.
And I think it's really looking at, does this goal come from a need to feed my identity? So if you're feeding an identity of success, what does success mean in terms of the ego? Well, it often means that you're making a certain amount of money, you've accumulated a certain amount of things, you have certain relationships with what we quote influential people, but as you know from my book, that's not the
That's not
type
the
of
definition.
influence that we talk about.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so and again, nothing wrong with wanting things. It's just that often these things become the goal to have happiness, to have joy. And we all know that that's a very fleeting feeling. So the new car, after a couple of months and a couple scratches, it's just a car. It doesn't matter what you're driving,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, some people might disagree, but really, it's all it all is identity based when we choose those things, and so we have to be careful when we're choosing, that we are choosing things that are based in a deep love for ourselves, for humanity, for other people. And as an example, I do have a nice car. I have a Tesla. But what I always say to people is, I didn't choose the Tesla for identity. I chose the Tesla because it was an electric car, and I felt very passionate about, limiting our oil and gas use. And so it doesn't mean I judge people who drive non-electric cars, because I don't. But it was a personal choice based out of love for the planet versus, ego identity.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And yeah, that's very important. And now that we've gone through like 3 pillars or 4 pillars already, we've gotten rid of our power patterns, we've gotten rid of our egos. We are now fully present in the moment, and we are connected to the divine being, and we know our purpose, and we are pursuing our purpose. We are no more in the first level purpose, we are now in the second, third level purpose already. And now that we also talked about the potential, we know Now I have my holy flow and I am walking in this holy flow. I think one thing that is important is what you talked about in, I think, chapter 12, and that is mastery in form. We are going towards the leadership, we're going towards the influence now. So we have the mastery in form, and you made mention of Da Vinci, for example, in that case.
Yes,
I
yes.
don't know if you can tell me the story a little bit about Da Vinci and your love for him.
Yeah, yes. Well, actually, when we look at the Renaissance, one of the things that they weren't afraid of, people like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael. I mean, there's many, many artists, but also there are great poets and statespeople and orators that came from that period. And uh, I often, it's so profound for me to think about the fact that, it's that all started in a relatively small town. I think, I don't know, 60 or 50,000 people, wasn't a large amount of people. And yet to this day, we know so much about the Renaissance painters. So it was a very curious thing to me. How did that all happen? How did we get to such a high level of mastery in a very condensed period of time with a small population? So what I write about is really talking about that. I'll just touch on a couple of things with Michelangelo as an example. The who would have been comparable to the president or in our case prime minister, saw Michelangelo's work, and it was his very first sculpture. And he said, that fawn that you sculpted, he said, good work, very good work. And the old men would have a tooth missing and their gums would be receded. So you need to make it more accurate. So rather than Michelangelo saying, "Oh my God, I made a mistake. I'm done for. I I can't do this," right?
Yeah.
And no, he went back and he worked and worked and worked to recreate the sculpture in the way that I'm just trying to think of his name now again. The comparable to the prime minister. I'm just lost his name now. But anyway, so the wonderful thing is that this man, yes, now I remember, Medici said, come. He went back. He saw the improvement, and he said, let me see the boy, meaning Michelangelo. And so the workshop master brought the boy to to him, and he said, I like your work, I love your work, and I want you to come and live with our family. And it was such a beautiful gesture. He paid for Michelangelo's father as well and mother to come and be there so that he would have family. But the thing that I was touched by so much was that this boy was just a regular boy, off of the street. Nobody special in terms of the ego's eyes, but this man Medici saw his brilliance. He saw his potential, and he put him in front of beautiful people who taught Michelangelo about poetry, about philosophy, gave him wonderful books that helped to grow his mind. And so when we think about our own lives in mastery, it's such a wonderful story, because really when we are as a community supporting each other's calling. See, if Michelangelo wasn't supported, he wouldn't be who he is today. He needed the support. He needed somebody to say, I believe in you, and I'm going to show you more and how to do this, and help him grow more to a higher level. That's where all of these painters from the Renaissance had one thing in common. They had community, and they had huge support to become the best at what they could do.
Yeah.
And in North America, Toby, I don't know about how it is, in Germany or other parts of the world, but I do know, and I've witnessed a very strong individualism, which actually works against us reaching a high level of mastery, because everybody says, no, I'm just going to do my own thing. And now it's worse. In
With
COVID,
COVID, yeah.
everybody's like, oh, I'm doing my own thing.
Mm.
And that's not how you get to greatness. You get to greatness with the support of others around you.
Yes, yes, and that's what true influence actually means: mentorship and modeling to other people, being a positive mentor. What's is there negative mentorship? I don't know, but being a good mentor and growing, helping other people to grow, to develop in their to master their craft.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
when I think about my own life and many other people who've reached, a high level of achievement in their careers, I think, wow, there's always someone who's influenced them in a
Mm.
loving way to rise to where they are today. And I think that has been really a lost art in North America, that we don't have more community to support us to get to that level.
Yes, yeah. And one other part that is also very important as an influencer or someone who wants to be a positive influencer is activism, taking part in, making movements or doing something to make a change or, yeah, to change the world or impact the world in one way or the other. And I'd love you to talk about this a little bit. Starting a movement, for example, what's the role of, passion in this activism, and as well as the energy and the balance that I need to be to be a positive influence and, to be a good activist. Yeah.
Well, I love the word activism, even though a lot of people are afraid of it.
Mm.
And I think the reason that people shy away from that word is because a lot of activists from the past, some people wonderful and have done amazing things, but there's many other activists who took it took some of their activism and brought it on their ego. So in
Mm.
other words, it became an identity
Mm.
of with their ego. They had to be right at all costs.
Yeah.
And so some leaders of movements actually, work, even though they started originally with a wonderful plan, their movements weren't, they just didn't develop into what they could have, because the leaders or the people who were, managing this were in their egos and had to have things a certain way, weren't going to listen to other people, had to be
Mm.
right. So when we think about being an activist, whether we are starting a movement ourselves or whether we are, joining a movement, the most important thing you can do to really make change on the planet is to work on yourself first,
Yeah.
right? We
Yes.
all think, oh, if I just do this, I'm going to save the world and it's going to be done. But we need to really always come back humbly to what is it in me that I need to look at in order to make that change, in order to influence people to come on board with the movement.
Mm.
And so, there's obviously been many beautiful people like Martin Luther King who've done that successfully, but a lot of people have not, because they didn't develop that inner awareness.
Yes, yeah. And how do you find that balance and the energy to, carry out activism?
Yes. So I love the word passion, and I think that we all need to have a deep inner drive for that movement or for activism. Um, and so when we garner that passion, it comes from our soul. It's not something that that you can just muster up with a song. Let's put a song on and let's all feel passionate. That
Yeah.
only lasts about 10 minutes.
Yes. Yeah.
So we always have to stay quiet and come back to, why am I doing this?
Mm.
What is the real reason that I'm doing this? What's the drive, the inner soul's calling? And to come into balance, what I love to say is, if you have a partner in your life, and that person also wants to be part of the movement, to allow each other, like to listen to each other's ideas, to allow for the flow of communication,
Mm.
to have space to yourself, have a lot of silent time. I know for me, if I don't have enough silent time in the day, I'm irritated. I don't do well. So to know that, silence and I always call it being with God, but you can call it whatever you want. But for me, I need that time away from everything else. And that inspires me to have the passion and to keep going.
Yes, that's awesome. That's really great. And that's the crown of it all, passion. To be a great influence in life, you have to have that passion for that movement that you are going on, the passion to fulfill your purpose, the passion to find your potential, the passion to get rid of all the power patterns that could, prevent you from fulfilling your purpose in life, and
Yes.
the passion to be present also is quite important. I really appreciate everything that you've explained to me today, everything you've taught me today. And I really appreciate your book, the Tao the Tao of Influence. And I appreciate the way it takes us through the journey of from the muddy power patterns to the having the love pattern that you need, actually the love pattern that you need to carry out your journey, to finding your presence, to finding your purpose, and also to finding your potentials. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Is there anything else you would love to talk about that I've not asked you yet? I think we've covered a lot already.
I think I'm complete as we are. I just want to have and say a lot of gratitude to you and to your show and what you do for people, Toby. It's really a beautiful show, and the way that you ask your questions is so lovely. So I really want to thank you. And for the listeners out there, there's two ways to get a hold of me, KarenMcGregor.com. You can go there. And if you're interested in speaking, or you have a calling to speak, you can also go to speakersuccessformula.com, and you'll find me there.
Yes, that's one thing we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about your TEDx, your awesome TEDx, your speeches, and the way you, it's really amazing. I think we didn't talk about that because this book was really, it's really packed with a lot of knowledge, and we don't have enough time to even cover everything from the book.
No worries. Well, people can look me up and Google TEDx. You'll find my TEDx talk there. And it is related to influence in the way that, I talk about happiness. So what is true happiness? How do we get there? And so it's connected, but it's not the same material. So yeah, people can check out the TEDx talk as well.
Yes, and find some happiness while being a positive influence to the world.
Yes. Thank you so much, Toby, for having me here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I am eternally grateful for your time, your love, and contributions. You mean a lot to me. Thank you once again for listening and sharing with your loved ones. Don't forget to subscribe and follow this journey on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms in the description. Stay blessed.